This is a classic because it is the most roller coaster verse play I have ever read.
This is a classic because it tells the story of a well-rounded queen who's just looking to do the best for her country.
This is a classic because it is such a nuanced look at what is inside our hearts.
This is our history. This is our legacy.
Hello, and welcome to This is a Classic, the Expand the Canon Theater podcast. We're your hosts.
Emily Lyon, Artistic Director of Hedgepig Ensemble Theater.
And me, Shannon Curnthin, Director of Production for Hedgepig.
Expand the Canon is a program of Hedgepig Ensemble, a Brooklyn-based company that reimagines the classics, creating a legacy of storytelling with gender equity at its core.
Today, we are diving into Catherine Bernard's Laodamia, Queen of Epirus, from the Expand the Canon list available at expandthecanon.com. Little content warning, we will be discussing murder and physical violence during this episode. If you were to go to our website, and you should, what is our pitch for this play, Emily?
If you're looking to blend the political intrigue of Shakespeare's histories with the visceral drama of a Greek tragedy, consider Catherine Bernard's tight verse play featuring a moral yet conflicted queen trapped in a love quadrangle. Caught between her heart and her sense of place, Laodamia, the Queen of Epirus, has always lived a life of self-sacrifice until she falls in love with her sister's betrothed. Set against the backdrop of an impending revolution, this tragic love story is as much about deep sisterly bonds as it is about political intrigue. As her feelings conflict with the world's expectations and the whole court is thrown into chaos, Laodamia must decide whether to follow her heart or her sense of duty. Tense, vibrant, and a true vehicle for a powerhouse female actor, this play will keep you in suspense until the last climactic second.
Dum, dum.
Let's dive into this plot a little bit because it sounds real exciting.
Oh my gosh.
Very excited. So Laodamia is a queen in need of a husband because patriarchy. Because why not?
Well, also because her dad says so, right?
Right.
Which is double patriarchy.
Right. She's been promised to Atale of the Aetolians, who's not really a nice man, but it's out of her duty to her country to bring peace to the land. Her country has been at war and in conflict with his, and this was the way to usher a time of peace. However, Laodamia is in love with Gelon, who's a foreigner who's lived in Epirus for a long time, and he's fought for the country. But Gelon is in love with Nereus, who is Laodamia's sister. So it's a bit, this is what I like to say, it's a bit midsummery without the comedy, because it's high-stakes drama here.
Oh, yeah.
So out of love and respect for her sister, Laodamia hides her feelings for Gelon and is resolved to marry Atale. You know, she's like, I'm going to do this because I'm a queen. I have to, I am bigger than... If you've watched The Crown, you understand that a queen is her country. She's more than just her person.
It's like part of a treaty or something.
Yeah.
That she's like legit official documents.
Yeah. It's like not just duty. It's also like, it's a signed contract. But Atale is murdered. And now war is at the doors of Epirus as his country seeks revenge and retribution for the murder. Because it's assumed that it was a murder done by the people of Epirus.
Yeah, because they were like winning the war or something, but he was going to come marry her, and then suddenly he's just like suddenly dead the day before they get married. All suspicious.
A little bit suspicious, especially because like no one liked him.
Well, probably his people liked him, but
sure.
Yeah, definitely no one on our side, no one in Epirus was like, sounds great.
Yeah, and it does come up as like quite a shock. It's one of the first things we learn, like in the first 10 pages. It's like Atale, this whole thing is set up, right? And then it's like Atale is dead, and we're like, oh God, what's happening?
Yeah, this is the first like big turn on the roller coaster. Well, no, it was maybe the second one, because I think the first one is like Laodamia being like, guess what? I'm in love with Gelon. Oh shit.
Sure.
And you're like, what?
Sure.
And then Atale's dead and you're like, what?
Atale dies. Yeah. Plot twist. The people of Epirus are terrified, and in their fear, not just the people, but also the court. Everyone in Epirus is terrified, and they're seeking a strong leader. And that leader cannot just be their queen, who has been emblem of strength throughout her reign. But no, she needs a strong man at her side. And everyone believes that man should be Gelon. They want Laodamia to marry Gelon. That's the popular vote. He's been fighting for the country. It's always kind of like the underdog thing. Like, he didn't come from their country, but he's this Italian in Greece who's really fought for them and who believes in their country. And and he's handsome and strong, so why not? But at the same time, Sostrate, a prince of Epirus, he declares his love for Laodamia and wants to marry her, both out of love, so he says, but mainly to social climb.
He's also one of those people that no one really likes.
Yeah. He's like there because he's, of noble blood and stuff, but he's clearly just a little sneaky and snaky.
Sneaky and snaky, yes.
He's a little peeved that a foreigner has caught the eye of the queen, and so he starts trouble in between the queen, her sister, and Gelon, and the people of Epirus. Like, he's kind of like, first, he's like, I will get her to love me because it makes more sense for the country to be ruled by two Grecian people, blah, blah, blah. And then it turns into a bit of like, if I can't have her, no one can type of thing. It's a weird.
Mm-hmm. And also, spoilers, doesn't he reveal that he's the one that murdered Atale?
Yes.
He's like, I'm going to kill this dude so I can get in there. And you're like, bro.
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
Very important.
So, like, very Iago vibes.
Yeah. It's also important to note that at this point, Laodamia is like, I was ready to marry Atale. I'm ready to do what is necessary for my country. And if the people want Gelon to rule, who am I to stand in the way, but also her sister? Like, this conflict is also present for her, while Sostrate is also adding to the stress that she feels.
Yeah, she's just between so many rocks and hard places. I think the one hard place that doesn't need to be a hard place is nobody likes Sostrate. No one wants him to be king except for him.
Yeah.
So it is very funny that it's like all these other interestingly placed chess pieces. And then Sostrate being like, but I'm a nice guy and I've loved you forever, so love me back. And she's like, no.
Right.
No one wants that.
No one wants you. And he just really, truly does not understand how that could be possible. In a sequence of events, there's a lot of things that happen in this play, and so we'll just do the brief summary. But in a sequence of events, Nereus finds out about Laodamia's secret love for her lover Gelon. Gelon professes his undying love for Nereus. Like, he pretty much says, I would rather see this country burn than not marry your sister, to Laodamia's face. He's like, I don't really care about your country's needs at this point. If it means that we can't be together and we truly, truly love each other, then I fine, this country will fall. Which is a little like, bro. Laodamia's a little.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of hot to be like, yes, keep your word, like, love me so much that you're gonna, like, you'll give up everything for me, but also a little excessive. I think we've gotten to the point where, like, okay.
Yeah.
You can find love again, sir.
For sure. I feel like this play, I mean, we'll also talk about this later, but this play, the women are very much so the voice of reason in here, because Gelon goes to Nereus and he tells her all this, and Nereus is like, no, like, there's a whole country at war. This is better for the country. Also, this will hurt my sister. I can't do this. And Gelon is like, you're really tearing my heart apart. And she's like, this is tearing me apart. I'm princess of this country. There's a duty to uphold. I'm torn. You're not helping by being like, screw everything. Let's just be together. When there's war at our doors. Like, he's really not. You would think a soldier who's fought for a country would be like, you know what? Let's follow through. Also, it's not like he won't ever see her again. But Nereus is the voice of reason here, which is just really painful for her too.
I know, and beautiful and heartbreaking.
Yeah, so all of this is happening while soldiers from the warring country, from Atale's country, are coming closer and closer to the walls of Epirus. And there's a revolution in the streets because the queen is taking her sweet time. Well, they believe the queen is taking her sweet time to decide who will be ruling next to her. And they just want stability. And they believe a marriage will be proof of that. So there's there's a lot of pressure from the country at large / just the city outside the castle walls.
Because to be fair, she's not going to go fight the war herself.
Yeah, exactly. So, as a response to all of this, Laodamia exiles Gellin because his presence here is just like creating so much strife for her sister, for the country, for Sosstrate. It's just like a lot. Sosstrate doesn't know this, and in a fit of rage goes to kill Gellin, but is killed by Gellin instead.
He's a good swordsman, you know?
He's a pretty, I mean,
what do you think was going to happen?
Exactly. Milo, Sosstrate's men that I spoke about earlier, seeks revenge and then goes to attack Gellin, but the queen is like, no, puts her body in front of Gellin, and she dies. Tragic. The stakes are super high. This is happening with a lot of other things as well. And in the end, the only ones left standing are Nereus and Gellin, who become king and queen of Epirus. And that's the end.
Legacy.
I don't know that I've really, talked about the importance of the sisters, but the sisters are truly close. Like, you understand throughout this play that the sisters are really, really close. They grew up together. They believe in each other. They support each other. And so when Nereus finds out that her sister is in love with Gellin, there's a lot of warring hearts and conflicting emotions, and both of them are just trying to do what's best for each other and the country. And so I want to emphasize that the sisters are really close, and it's a really important relationship in this play.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons that this play is so beautiful and enduring and powerful is, I think the men get stuck in their own vision, like a very specific vision of, okay, Sosstrate's like, this is how I want to be king, and this is how I want to do it, this is what I want. And Gellin is like, I want to be a lover, this is how I want to do it, this is what I want. But the women in this play, their hearts are so big. The queen and her sister love each other so much. They love their country so much. They love Gellin so much. They're really trying to have it all. They're really trying to take care of each other and the country and their hearts and the person they love, and really try and be good about everything. I think it really speaks to this sense of, especially today, this like conversation about like, can women have it all?
Yeah.
And women trying to caretake for as much of their world as possible. She's endlessly trying to do the right thing.
I fully agree, and especially with the conversation that we're having today. At the time that we're recording this, Jacinda Ardern, who is the Prime Minister of New Zealand, announced her retirement in January 2023. And yeah, it's very much so this question of can we do it all? Can women have the power? Can they lead? And I think what Jacinda Ardern can do that Laodamia couldn't do is she could step away and be like, I need to take care of myself. I gave for my country. I gave for duty. And I guess Laodamia does that at the end by dying. That's her act of, not self-care, because that's so, whoa.
Sorry, yeah.
That's her act of...
I feel you.
That's her act of passion. That's her act of acting for herself, right? That's the act she does for herself, is putting herself in between the arrow that was meant for Gellin and his body. And it speaks to how, especially at a time when this is happening in this play, this is happening in, old Greece, antiquity time Greece, that women didn't really have, especially women in power, there weren't a lot of avenues for them. It was, you are a representative of your country, and that's who you are.
Like when you're reading a play by a woman in the 1600s, which is so cool that this play is so early, that, I think Catherine Bernard is trying to balance that very patriarchal, she can only be in this lane, she's so boxed in. Laodamia is so boxed in.
Yeah.
And yet, she is trying to balance all these things, all these roles, and people encourage her, like, well, you should get what you want, you should have your love, you should be able to crown whoever you want, but like the reality is way more complicated than that.
For sure.
And so I think it's so cool that she represents that thoughtfully.
I think one of the moments where she kind of goes sister before country is when she exiles Gellin. But then again, that has immediate repercussions, and Sosstrate creates all this chaos.
Well, but she also exiles him because, like, the whole riot is so like, now we want Galen, we want Galen.
Right, exactly.
And if he's not going to freaking marry her because of her sister, then it's like, you can't be stirring up all this crazy. It's like Beatlemania for Galen.
I love how it's Beatlemania. But no, I
Well,
hear
I'm
you.
not like
I hear
hip.
you.
I don't know about like
But then
Harry
again,
Styles
yeah.
and whatever.
I would say, yeah, Harry Styles a pretty accurate representation of Gillen.
Galen is basically Harry Styles. That's
Pretty
what
much.
we've learned.
But yeah, that's exactly what my point is. Like, all of her acts are queen first, other things second. And if she can meld those together, sure. But when she puts her body in between the arrow and Gelon, that's the first time that she is not queen. If she was acting as her with her stature, she would not have done that. She wouldn't even have left the castle walls, I don't think. But it's that's her sacrifice is the one true event and action that is kind of just for her.
Yeah. Although the other thing too that I love about this, in sort of that like, the Greek tragedy reference of it all, is she has given herself this Achilles heel. Like, Galen was around and she was like, I can't take it. I am so into this dude, but I have to marry this gross dude because of this treaty. So to get over the fact that I can't have this man, I'm going to set up him and my sister. So she also like brought some of this situation on herself, which is such a like Greek classic. Bringing upon your own drama or downfall is such a typically Greek setup that I think it's just so interesting that she has also placed, in terms of sort of the chess match of it all, she's set up herself to have this like very tough and heartbreaking situation. I also, in terms of like reasons we love this play, I want to talk about the language of it. The language of this play is so gorgeous. There's so many monologues. It's this beautiful verse play. The translation is awesome, actually. I think it would probably be really challenging to translate French verse into English verse.
Yeah.
And I feel like the translation we found is super successful at that.
I would agree. I find the language in this English version to be very close to what I know to be French verse. It's full of nuance and imagery, and these characters are kind of really truly speaking from the heart, which is why I think we love these classical theater pieces, is because they kind of put into words the crazy emotions that we have in our bodies. And I think Catherine Bernard does that really well with Laodamia. It's just there's so much going on for these main characters that she's able to put in this. And I think that's truly beautiful.
As I was reading it, waiting for somebody at dinner, and when they showed up, I was like, oh my God. And they were like, what are you reading? And I was like, no, I just found out he died. Don't worry. Sorry. I'm in this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then every single act, it's like, oh shit, what?
Yeah, I definitely felt with this play that you're in it. Like it 100% feels like someone is like, oh my God, like this is happening, this just happened, and blah, blah, blah. And you're on the edge of your seat the whole time because none of it is expected, especially the end. Yeah. It's like thing after another thing where you're like, no, and you're really just in it with everybody and you're feeling it.
And I will also just say, throwing this in, there's a lot of great language. It's a small cast, and there's only one place that you have to make. Oh my gosh, how producible.
I know.
Producible play this is.
No one changes costumes.
Oh, yeah.
There isn't any, very easily producible play. And if you want to do it in a black box, why not? Many options.
Please. Indeed. So I want to throw in, we read this play, and I just fell in love with the play itself. And I wasn't thinking, like, is this historically accurate? Like, are these real people? I didn't care. I was just, like, so in the thing.
Right.
But as we came to, like, prep for the podcast, I was like, I wonder is this real? Are these real places? What's happening? So I went down a little Google dive, and turns out Laodamia is probably, okay, so I think Laodamia was a real person. It seems like she was, although she also goes by Deidamia, Deidamia the second, who was in fact queen in 233 BC. So both Epirus and Aetolia were real places in what is now Greece. So this is like the whole story is like history adjacent. Her sister Nereus did marry Gelon or Gello of Syracuse. Cute, but she went off to Syracuse, so they were not hanging out in Epirus, or at least if so, it was not for very long. But also, like Laodamia is part of a bunch of Greek myths. She was part of this Greek myth that's mentioned in the Iliad where she has a kid with Zeus. But then sometimes it's some other guy that she had a kid with, Xanthus. Or there's one where she's like shot by Artemis one day while she's weaving for some reason. And one where she was married to Protesilaus, who died in the Trojan War, and she was so sad that he died there that she committed suicide. There's a story of Laodamia being the wife to King Archas, where she was like one of the daughters of Sparta. So that one seems to turn out better. A lot of these are kind of sad stories. There's also one where she's the wife of Anticlus, who hid in the Trojan horse. And he was the one guy who, when Helen was like trying to test the Trojan horse and be like, oh, I sound like all your wives. Oh, I sound like Laodamia now. Apparently, her husband Anticlus wanted to be like, oh, Laodamia, I love you. And I think one of them like had to shut him up, basically. So they didn't give it away. So, there are some positive endings in Greek myths to Laodamia's story. But tracking back to the sort of like real life history version, where she was queen for like a year and a half, sad face. It was like not a very long reign, but it does seem like there was a rebellion, a riot there in Epirus. And by some accounts, Nereus sent her mercenaries. She and Gelon were like, sure, have these folks to fight on your account. But also in some accounts, she was in fact murdered by Mylon, not Milo. But there are also accounts that say that this is all conflated and like, the Greek myths and the queen and that it's all being misread. So there's a lot of question marks. This is not a highly, highly documented time. If anyone finds some primary sources, let us know. But yeah, I just think it's fun to be like, clearly Catherine Bernard knew a lot of these myths, knew some history.
The French are weirdly obsessed with Greek myths. Yeah, there are a few authors that wrote a lot about Greek. There's Pierre Corneille, who's a French author and playwright who wrote about Greek myth. There's Jean Racine, who wrote a few. They were before her time. They were before Catherine Bernard's time, but they were, Phaedra, Andromachus, Iphigenia. Right. There's a lot of like stories there for some reason. I don't know why the French were. I think it's because of the romance of it. They were a little bit intrigued by the power of the Greek myths.
Well, you can definitely tell by this play the French are romantics.
It's exciting to know that these plays also have some basis in history, that these sort of stories, I think this also speaks to why it's a classic, is that these stories clearly come back time and time again. The fact that we're still talking about it in 2023 is quite impressive.
It actually, in a way, reminds me of another play on our list, Las Pascualas, where there is this myth, that's taking on this Chilean myth about women and their experience of love and loss. And I think it's really interesting that like Catherine Bernard has taken on this story of a real life woman who did have riots and was under very, intense pressure, and really humanizes her and makes us understand how this could have happened in such a much more dynamic, probably honest and heartfelt way that kind of shifts our understanding of the myth, our understanding of the story, and is giving, as we want to and expand the canon, giving these women their legacy back.
History.
Oh my gosh, Shannon, I'm so excited to hear what we know about Catherine Bernard. Give me your bio. What you got?
So Catherine Bernard, or Catherine Bernard, if you want to be really particular about it, was a late 17th century French writer who wrote a number of novels, poems, and plays throughout her lifetime. Special fact, she was the most successful female playwright of the 17th century. And I want to say, because we said female playwright, I want to maybe say that she was the most successful playwright of the 17th century.
Wait, do we know if that's like in France or just like total?
In France.
Okay.
Yeah, in France.
Because I was
Yeah.
going to be like, Afra Ben has some shit to
Yeah,
say.
yeah. In France. Thank you for that distinction. She's perhaps best known for setting the aesthetic foundation for the French fairy tale genre, with her central tenet that the adventures should always be implausible and the emotions always natural, which is really fun. That she tried to root true emotion in these fantastical settings.
And that kind of echoes with like this play too. Like the amount of roller coaster is not implausible, definitely, but like is challenging, but the emotions are definitely natural. So
Right. What's particularly notable about Bernard's work as a playwright is the fact that she focused on writing tragedies as well as fairy tales. In 17th century France, it was considered scandalous for a woman to write tragedy, yet she did so to great success. I also want to know, I mean, I talked about this last season, but the French considered a lot of things scandalous according to women. And like I said last time, it was illegal for women to wear pants until 2015. It was a law in our Constitution that said that women could not wear pants. We did.
so bananas.
But isn't that insane? Isn't that
It is.
absolutely insane?
I think the whole like it's scandalous to write tragedy is interesting too, and I wonder why that started. Maybe that's another deep dive we could do someday. But it's also interesting to reflect now on the whole like rom-com culture. Like,
Right.
Oh, women like stories where good things happen to them. Oh no. Like, yeah, okay. Apparently it was also scandalous for us to tell stories where they didn't. So
I totally agree. Why there's a whole time in the world where women couldn't be exposed to war and sad things because we had a gentle nature and couldn't be exposed to the realities of life. And I think that's why it was scandalous for women to write about tragedy, because we were pure and had to remain untainted by the horrors of life. Clearly, we were very much affected by the horrors of life, but moving on. It's important to know. Emily, you posted this. You shared this.
Oh yeah, this is so interesting. Like we don't know that much about some of her life.
Right. There isn't like birth dates and stuff like that. She was pretty kind of private.
Yeah, and also it seemed that she like some of her history maybe got erased. That like she was born to this wealthy family, and so we knew she was born in 1662, and they were Protestants. But Catholicism was dominant in France at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when Catherine Bernard converted, she became Catholic like at 23. Yeah, at age 23, she converted, and she was removed from her family's baptism list. So they were like, so maybe we would have known more about her, but I don't know. But so one of the fascinating things that we do know though, like again, she was rich, so she was presumably well educated, but when she was 18 is when she published her first novel.
That's very impressive. And it's also incredible because her novels and plays and everything were super successful. And to be successful at such a young age so early is super impressive. But she relied primarily on the money she received from competitions and from noble patrons in the court of Louis XIV to survive. Writing was, especially for women, but as we know, writing, acting, all of that stuff wasn't always the most lucrative position for anyone. So it didn't bring her a large amount of wealth. But she existed in a precarious state at court because she depended only on the goodwill of her patrons. So this impacted the trajectory of her writing, and she had to steer clear of any nonfiction, satire, and poetry that saw many writers of her time exiled.
Right.
Yeah. This explains why she leaned so hard into the fairy tale genre throughout her career. You know, it's easy to talk about and to make fun of people when you're like, this is just a fairy tale, right?
Yeah. That like cover. And that's something that kind of Shakespeare did too, is he'd be like, oh, I'm not making this political commentary. It's about someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, but that's such a good point that she had so much patronage that she had to be careful. Also because she never married. She lived alone. She was a single lady.
Yeah.
Whole life.
She moved from Rouen, which is in France, to Paris by herself. And then, just lived alone, which is kind of like a big deal to travel. I mean, so far She traveled kind of far. I
In
think
the
for the
1600s?
time. And yeah. So she moved from Rouen to Paris by herself in the 1600s and was like, I'm going to rely on my work to make money. Her two most notable plays were this one, where Laodamia, first performed in 1689, and Brutus, performed 1 year later in France.
Okay, so speaking of rabbit holes, I did a little bit of Googling. I found this article, there are a couple really interesting articles about Brutus specifically and how it's been wrongly attributed to this guy whose first name is Bernard. So like maybe that's
Maybe.
part of it, but
Yeah.
probably not. Bernard de Beauvoir de Fontenelle.
Bernard de Beauvier de Fontenelle.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yep.
Shannon.
You're welcome.
A resident French speaker. Shout out to Professor Nina Eckstein for writing an article unpacking all this. One of the reasons this got attributed to this other Bernard, who's a man, is that Voltaire wrote a play also called Brutus like years later, and it got mixed reviews. And so then they started like reviving. They were like, oh, we should look back at that one really good version of Brutus. And so they started republishing it. And he had also maybe, I haven't read his version, whatever. We read lady plays, but supposedly he'd like borrowed kind of a lot. I mean, it's also history. Everything's vague, but
Sure. I'm sure he was super excited when people were like, your play's not great. Let's do this one again.
Right? But it's so interesting because at the time, like when our plays were reviewed, Brutus got a really great review, and someone wrote, quote, women today are capable of anything after seeing it. I was like, well, yeah, women always, but sure. Yes, they are. But it's so interesting that like it is another one of these cases where a man, I think because I'm gonna butcher that, the other male Bernard who is sometimes attributed to this play. I think he basically was telling Voltaire like, no. And it's too bad that like once again a woman's work is subsumed by, oh well, because he referenced it or because he thought Voltaire's play was not so great, that clearly he must have written this excellent edition because he wrote other stuff. No, give women their legacies.
Truly. Give us our due.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's not like she didn't work hard for it, right? And even if she hadn't, she did it. So give her due.
Oh, the other thing that's cool is I think both Laodamia and Brutus were both produced at La Comédie Française.
Yes.
And were like huge successes.
Which is a big deal because La Comédie Française is touted to this day to be, kind of the epitome of French theater. And to be, if you are part of La Comédie Française, you are this touted author and playwright who's really helped you represent France in a way. And we know the French have a strong nationalism. And we really love our literature and we believe in our words. So to be a part of La Comédie Française or to have something done there is a really big deal.
Maybe this is a good switch over to the Académie Française, which I know you know a little more about, but I know that she was rejected from the Académie Française because of her gender. So rude.
Yeah, the Académie Française. So in the spirit of the French just making a lot of institutions for French stuff, which is actually super true. We have like a bunch of departments and ministers. L'Académie Française is a French institution that was created to cement and enforce the rules of the French language and continue to elevate it to a high standard. French has always been a language that's like changed a lot because different regions had different ways of saying words, had different ways of writing it. And so once the French started gaining power towards the early Middle Ages and French started to be a language that was spoken by more people, they were really like, okay, let's set some rules so that we can live up to the power that we're gaining. Because French was being touted as a language that was close to Latin. And as we know, because of the Bible, Latin was really a language of the wealthy, of the educated, and French was getting up there. And so they created l'Académie Française. And they instituted the French dictionary, and every time something changes in the French language, it goes through l'Académie Française. So there was a point in time where there was something spelled with a PH and it was changed to an F. And people were like, what is this? Like, younger people were like, sure. Older people were like, no, this is diminishing the integrity of the French language. Because if you've ever tried to learn French or write in French, you know that there's rules of French make no sense sometimes. You're just like, why are there so many letters for this sound? I will say English is kind of the same. But l'Académie Française really tries to stay true to the French values and to the traditionalism of the French language. And to be part of the Academy as an author of any kind is proof that you're a valued contributor to the French language. So for Catherine Bernard to not be accepted in l'Académie Française, and there were just a bunch of sexist men too, who were traditionalist and very set in their ways at the time, just speaks to the reluctance to accept a woman of her caliber into their ranks.
But instead, she was like, well, I don't know exactly what she said did.
Yeah.
But instead, she's like, all right, whatever, you're not going to include me. I'm going to go join this Italian one, the Académie di Ricordati di Padua. If they won't include you in wherever you are, go find where you are accepted because you deserve it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the French, made a mistake, and that's on them. Bernard wrote a series on top of the plays and the poems and the novels that she wrote. Bernard wrote a series of 4 novellas titled Les Malheurs de l'amour, which translate to The Misfortunes of Love, which included Inès de Cordoue. She introduces the series, explaining,
I see so much disorder in even the most reasonable love that I thought it would be better to present to the public image of misfortunes coming from this passion than to show virtuous, gentle lovers happy at the end of the book.
Which is so interesting, because in this book, in Inès de Cordoue, it provided commentary on the confining nature of marriage for women, like chosen marriage, which we also see in Laodamia, and it's frequently used to argue that fairy tales were created by educated women rather than peasants, because they spoke about women's experience.
Yeah, and there's also, one thing we don't love doing here at Expand the Canon is like putting any labels to people that they wouldn't have used themselves. But there is kind of an interesting article with some conjecture about like, was Catherine Bernard potentially asexual? Or, because there's no record of her having any relationship. She never gets married. She lives alone. And I guess usually there's some kind of record of, oh, well, she was seen a lot with this person, or, oh, she was really good friends, sometimes in quotes, with someone. But really, and again, we don't know that much about her. So again, it's sort of conjecture, but it's interesting to hear from her own interpretation of like even the most reasonable love brings misfortune, brings sort of these really hard twists of fate. And so it's interesting to just wonder, like, is that something she just observed? Has she been in love and deeply hurt? I mean, guessing based on this play, based on Laodamia, like the nuanced understanding she has of that sense of sacrifice, of love, of devotion. I think it's just interesting to think about what was her experience of that. And, as we're seeing the political commentary within this too, what was her and what were women's experiences of love, devotion, and marriage at this time? Here is a recording from our filmed scene from Catherine Bernard's Laodamia, performed by Sky Pagan and directed by me, Emily Lyon.
Last shall I confess. What can I hide when I see the climax of my woes approaching? You know my great affection for Nereus. But soon, oh gods, Gelin shall wed this sister, and Gelin is secretly lord of my heart. My father, Alexander's final treaty, mandates my loveless marriage to Atale. I must fulfill his absolute decree. 1,000 reasons of the state further require it. My crown is shaky, my people are rebellious, already worn out with a cruel war. The interests to the throne to which I'm chained make this cruel marriage a necessity. But my heart rebels and fights incessantly against a father's will, reasons of state. Alas, how happy we would be, Argira, if always dangerous passions were required to wait, at least before they should arise, until an eager lover showed his ardor. But oft, the spark that dominates our hearts precedes the signs that should kindle our love. Such is my involuntary love for Gellin. No sign of hope ever graced this secret torment. Meanwhile, I saw that he loved no one else. He might yet turn his preference toward me. My heart, with eagerness, seized on a hope so false, so insubstantial, and dazzled by the charm of a vain error, erected a strong barrier to my duty. To rid me of this error that my weakness cherished, I arranged a match between Gellin and the princess. How hard I tried! I thought, harsh on myself, that love is cured as soon as it turns hopeless. My trying to make them fall in love succeeded too well. My rivals are the prophets, alas. This love I fostered has grown to such excess. It took no more to rob me of all hope. I thought their love would cure me of my own and find myself obsessed with jealous sorrow. What a remedy for love.
Thank you again to Sky Pagan and Emily Lyon, wink wink, our director of photography, Jenny DeRosier, and sound designer, Stephanie Coriatis, production stage manager, Jessica Fournier. You can find this scene and more on our Instagram page.
And thank you to Kalina Ko, who's another curator for Expand the Canon, for the dramaturgy used in this episode.
A special thank you to Stephen Beck for his editing prowess on this episode of This is a Classic.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of This is a Classic, the Expand the Canon podcast. Learn more at expandthecanon.com.
If you believe in the importance of expanding the canon, please give us a 5-star review and subscribe to this podcast.
And then hit the share button and forward it along to a friend, a colleague, professor.
For info on what's up next, you can follow us on Instagram,
At Hedgepig Ensemble Theater,
Facebook,
/Hedgepig Ensemble Theater.
or join our mailing list at hedgepigensemble.org.
You can also support this effort by donating at the link in the comments below.
Again, I'm Emily.
And I'm Shannon. Ciao.
Thanks.